Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for the very kind welcome, Stan. I very much appreciate that. Just checking to make sure all the audio is coming through okay, folks. It seems to be. So, yeah, we'll give everyone a couple of minutes to arrive, and then we'll get started. How we doing? Let me just check YouTube, make sure we're live over there as well. Make sure everything's working. And yes, we're all working. Hey, Carmen, thanks very much for coming along. I'm glad you managed to make it. That's great. Thank you. Okay, right, folks. Well, let's get stuck in. Hang on while I just get myself comfortable. Cup of tea first before we get stuck in. All right, folks, good afternoon and welcome back to another Firestorm stream. My name is Pat Imrie, and today we are going to be continuing with our A to Z of sculpting creatures inside of ZBrush. Now, when we left off the last time, we had a bit of a catastrophe with with our macaque. So we're doing a Japanese macaque, and when we, at the last stream, we came out of our T-pose mesh after doing a couple of tweaks and a few fixes, and unfortunately the head collapsed in on itself. So what I've done in the kind of interim while I've been taking a small break from the streams is I've went through and I've actually fixed up our macaque to a much kind of more final version. I say more final. We've just given him a full head, we've given him a full body, and the main reason for this is I thought that the first thing that we could do when we came back to the stream is to maybe go through how you pose something in ZBrush. Kind of go away from things like sculpting fur and all that, because we've already looked at that, and I really wanted to focus on posing a character, and then if we have some time, we'll look at adding some fur to the creature as well. And obviously answering any kind of questions that anyone might have while we go along. And I know it's a little bit different from what we normally do, but I just felt that posing in ZBrush is something I get quite a lot of questions about, and I also get a lot of questions about the transpose master system as well, and it can be a little bit weird to work with. So if you're not sure what I'm talking about, if you go into the Z plugin options in ZBrush and scroll down, you'll find something called Transpose Master. What this allows you to do is it allows you to take multiple subtools, combine them temporarily into one subtool so that you can pose them all at the same time, and then essentially revert that back so that you've got your individual subtools again. So I decided to keep our character fairly simple. He's got his body and his head, and we've got eyeballs. Now, we will be doing some sculpting, just kind of a bit of a warm-up, and kind of tweak some of the forms on him, because I think his little face could do with maybe a little bit of cleanup, because I've also went ahead and z-remeshed the object and then added a few more subdivisions. So what this is going to let me do is go in and clean up and roughly smooth out some of the rougher forms that we've got. And we can see that these are a little bit messy, but that's not to worry. That's why we have the subdivisions. We have subdivisions so that we can drop down to that lower polygon count, make the tweaks that we want, and then we can step back up and we can add some more volume and some more details to our character. Now, I have some reference off screen that we're using, I do have an image of a Japanese macaque that I can bring up into the spotlight shortly, just in case you're not sure what they actually look like. However, they are more affectionately known as snow monkeys. These are the monkeys that like to sit bathing in the pools. So they're acclimatized to cold weather, but they like to bathe in really hot pools of water. So as always, folks, that's adorable. They are very cute. I do like Japanese macaques. I mean, I like monkeys in general, but Japanese macaques are particularly cute. But as always, folks, if you have any questions or any queries about what it is that we're doing here on the stream today, or any additional questions that you might have about ZBrush, the industry, or just creating 3D characters, creatures, you name it. If you have a question, feel free to ask. And if I can answer it, I will. And if I'm unable to answer it, I will point you in the direction of someone who can. So I'm just going to clean up the inside of the mouth a little bit. And as I said, I know this is a bit of a departure from what we normally do, but because we took a break, I had a bit of time to think about what might be useful. Hey, Manic! What might be really useful for viewers of the stream. And you sometimes need to shake things up a bit. So what we're doing here is we're starting with a model that's a little bit more finished, which is going to give you an opportunity to see how I refine some of the forms once they get into that further state. So what we're doing at the moment is just refining the lip. And one of the most important things that you have to remember whenever you're doing a facial expression, particularly around the lips, you be very careful you don't thin them out too much, because that's what's really going to give away that your creature is CG, and it's going to create that level of artificialness to it. Okay, and that's even if you're working with something stylized. You don't want to thin out any of these features too much. It's one of the reasons that when I sculpt eyelids, I tend to err on the side of making them a bit thicker than they might otherwise be, and I can always thin them back if needs be. But it allows me to retain the volume. We'll just smooth this back. Not gonna lie, the eyelids are bothering me a lot on this model. No matter what I do, I always seem to keep introducing little lumps and bumps, but you know, that's okay. It's all right to add little bits of individuality. And that's the thing to remember whenever you're doing a piece of artwork. Follow your own gut with what you create. Obviously, if you want to kind of copy something exactly, or if you're trying to kind of do a piece of fan art or anything like that, you're going to want to follow a certain rhythm with it. But it's important that you follow your own gut as to whether or not it's good or it's bad. So if you feel as though you need to justify, say, a design choice, or you have to explain to your viewers what something is, then that is a really good thing to have, because what it means is you've got a point of reflection there. You can think to yourself, well, if I'm having to ask these questions, then who am I really asking? Am I asking the viewer, or am I asking myself? And that's an important thing in improving yourself as an artist. Be brutal. You will always be your most kind of you'll be your harshest critic, okay? And learn to ask yourself those questions, okay? And look at your work objectively. And that's why it's really important to step away from something you're working on for a day, maybe 2 days, and then come back to it with those fresh eyes. And you will immediately see all the things you've done wrong. Instead of waiting until you finish the image or the animation, you post it on ArtStation or on anywhere on social media, and it's once you've posted it, you see all the mistakes and you wish you hadn't posted it. It's just one of those things. And I can guarantee you that majority of people won't see the mistakes. You will, but most people won't. Because as I said, we are our harshest critics. So I do have this great little photograph of one of these monkeys that I'm using as reference here, and he is pulling this expression. It's they are, as I said, they are very cute. So yeah, so the plan here is we're going to tweak up some of these forms just to give you all an idea of how I sometimes go about approaching these. And you can see it's a much slower process than when we're blocking things out and we're kind of sketching out our creatures. Everything's a lot more subtle, but we slow the pace down. And the thing to remember is that if you take your time at the beginning and you build up your forms properly, when you get to this stage where you're adding in these secondary and sometimes tertiary forms, it won't take much to take the character to where it needs to be. And obviously we're not looking at things like fine pore detail at this point. That's not important really at this case. Obviously it's important if you're going for realism, but I've said this many times, no amount of high frequency pore detail will fix a model that doesn't have its foundations set. It's the same as a building. If the foundations are rocky, it's going to fall down eventually. So using all the same kind of brushes I did before, when you've seen me block these out, a mix of various clay build-up brushes, Dam Standard, Standard brush, and probably one of my most used brushes, which is the Trim Dynamic brush. And you probably won't see much change. You're not going to see large changes at this stage. They're very, very subtle. They may not even show up on the stream overly well. I've tried to pick a material that showcases these a little bit better. So it's a bit easier for you to see what I'm doing as we sculpt this together. So what I'm doing here as well is obviously his upper lip is pursed and his lower lip is pursed as well. So we are just adding a little bit of compression just around the nose where that skin's, because the skin has to go somewhere. And whenever you're doing an expression on a character, think of it like that. Think of the skin in that context where it has to go somewhere. It doesn't just magically disappear so that you can create the facial shape that you need. The skin has to compress or slide into a different position in order for us to be able to pull off an expression. Now, I've given him a little bit too much of a human-like lip, so I'm going to take the trim dynamic here and just soften that off a bit. I don't mind kind of adding a bit more a human-like feature to him, to be honest. A little bit of an artistic license there. So how are we doing? Okay, so anyway, folks, now that we've kind of gotten into the swing of things a little bit more, let me know how everyone's doing. It's been a while since I've been streaming for Firestorm. I took a little bit of a break. I needed a little bit of time off just to recharge. Recharge, paint a few fences, household chores, all the fun things that we get to do. But it's really great to be back. It's always fun coming in and getting to interact with the Firestorm community and all of our viewers. I really enjoy sharing. I enjoy sharing my my knowledge that I've been very fortunate to kind of accrued over the last 18 years. So yeah, it's always fun to kind of share it with other artists, other people passionate about the same things that you are. Okay, we're starting to kind of refine the shape a bit more now. This is good. Although lower lids, we're definitely not in the right place with the lower lids. We need to go in. We're going to step down a subdivision. And this is one of the reasons that topology is really important, by the way, folks. Okay, I want to kind of really point this out. So if we look at the topology flow of this character, now I did this using the ZRemesher tool, but I insisted on using the guides brush in ZBrush. So you're asking ZBrush to follow a certain edge flow path, and that's so that when I sculpt along that path of the polygons, I don't get any weird broken artifacty lines. Okay, I'm getting a nice smooth surface to sculpt on, and this is why I would strongly recommend you don't take Dynamesh to a really high resolution and keep sculpting as a high-res model. I would always recommend that once you get to a certain point where your primary forms are locked in, so that your overall silhouette isn't going to change, that is when you start to Z-remesh your, it could be primary, it could be secondary, it could be a bit of a mix of the both. And once they're locked in, then you would do a Z-remesh, or ideally a complete custom retopology for your character. Then you can bring it back in and start projecting your details in and continue sculpting with fresh, clean topology. Okay? All right. And another little trick that you can do if you're trying to keep your volumes of the skin nice and plump, remember, if you use the inflate brush, but if you go into the brush settings and under the depth option, add a tiny bit of gravity to your brush, and you start just, let's lower the intensity of the brush there. I can start adding some inflation to the edges of some of these wrinkles. And what the gravity brush will do is it's going to add some extra weight to the bottom of the stroke. And it's going to help it rest and settle in to the rest of the forms. And the inflate brush is going to bring everything together, but with that added gravity, you get a little bit of realism just for free. Okay, let's take a quick look at how these are looking. I think we're going to have to do a little bit of an inflation on the edges of the eyelids. So I'm going to change my alpha to alpha 1, increase the intensity a bit, turn off gravity, and I'm just going to work the stroke up and over the top of the lid. And I'm just going to keep repeating that stroke over and over again. This is, I would rather build up the effect I need rather than do it in one clean stroke. It gives me more control over it. And whenever I'm doing something that's kind of semi-realistic, I find that the human error, the happy little accidents that we put in, that's what's going to add to the realism of our creatures and our characters. Then we can just take the trim dynamic, just work around the edge, and you can see that inflating that edge along the eyelid has really helped. It helps to seat the eyeball into the socket. Okay, and we can accentuate some of the wrinkles using the dam standard. like so. Smooth it back. And if you can even find, to be honest, Pablo Gomez got a great brush. If I can find it, I did have it earlier. He has I was using it. It's disappeared. There we go. His Skinfold brush. This is a really great brush for adding, funnily enough, skin folds. There we go. And if you ever find a brush online that you really like and you're curious about how it works, then have the brush selected, take note of things like the stroke type, and then go into the brush settings. And here we go, perfect example. If we go into the brush settings, you'll notice that this brush has a 100 level of gravity applied to it. Okay, so by doing that, if I do this to the side, you'll see that it's adding a lot of clean, very weighted, heavy strokes. Okay, and that's using the gravity option. And I just wanted to kind of show you that, you know, even if you do find a brush online that you like, doesn't mean that you can't create brushes yourself. And I would recommend it. I've created a few brushes, but they're not very good. That's why I go to Pablo, because Pablo is the best at that type of thing, in my opinion. He makes some of the best brushes out there. So now I am aware that I said that we were going to do some transpose, and we will get there. But right now I'm having a bit of fun just sculpting this little chap. So, chap, what an old thing to say, right? And right now Stan is furiously typing an insult into the chat. So, I'm going to jump over to my cleanup brush here and just start to add in a little bit of extra form and detail just into the caruncle area. And something I want to make note of is notice how I'm sculpting in the caruncle area, but then inset from the eyeball on the inner canthus. That's what this is called, by the way. That you've got your inner canthus, which is the, why am I pointing at my eye? I'll point at the character. That would make way more sense, Pat. You can tell I've not done this for a while. So this area in here, it's called the inner canthus. This is your outer canthus, okay? And what I've done here, so you can simply call it your tear duct, okay? You don't need to remember the correct anatomical name. If you say tear duct, everyone is going to know what you mean. And I've inset from this a little bit where the duct is at the front, and then I've started to sculpt in a little bit of extra detail. And again, this is just going to help seat the eyeball into place and adds a little bit more realism. And it doesn't have to be over the top, it can be quite subtle, okay? You don't need, what's this, sorry, went lurking while I had a stream in my ear. Not at all, Manic, not at all. Everyone's got to do what they got to do. So, we'll just add a bit more detail here. Oh, interrupted by the autosave. There we go. And when I zoom back out, I can see how that detail is working for me. And that's really important to do. Whenever you're sculpting, it's the same as if you're drawing or if you're painting. Step back from the work that you're creating. Obviously, we have the benefit in 3D that we can just zoom away from our model. And hey, Polly! Really love the skin folds on this. Thanks very much, Manic. Appreciate that. Thank you. But yeah, hey, Polly. Welcome in. I'm going to jump back over to the skin folds brush here, just add in a bit more adjustment to here. Thanks, Polly. Much appreciated. Okay, now, if you've ever looked at a baby macaque before, which in the last little while I have, you'd be amazed at how wrinkly monkeys are. This is what I find really funny about baby monkeys. They're really wrinkly. They're really wrinkly, and I think it just adds to how cute they are. Um, and one thing we can also do, folks, even though I don't really make my own brushes that often, we could do a class, I say a class, we could do a stream where we look at how to make your own brushes. So if that's something of interest that you would like to see, be sure to join the Firestorm Discord, and then you can go in and throw in your suggestions into the general chat. Go along, join the community, and and share your thoughts on my stream and the rest of the awesome streamers here at Firestorm Studios. Okay. Now let's take a little bit of a look at maybe adding should we add a bit more detail to his chest? Maybe, maybe not. We could add we could kind of adjust the nipples a bit. So we'll flatten them out a little bit, and then we'll take our dam standard and we'll just outline them a little bit. And then we're using the dam standard again. I'm just going to outline roughly where the sternum is, because again, there's not a lot of muscle mass on these little creatures. There's really not. So I'm adding a peak with the dam standard to the clavicle, and then I'm taking the trim dynamic and I'm just flattening off the top of that peak. I don't like this transition here, where the SCM muscle comes in. Don't like how that's looking, so I'm going to come back with my clay buildup and just try and blend them together. Because remember, whenever you're creating a creature or a real human being, you don't want to essentially show an écorché. You don't want to show a skinless human. That's not. Yes, it's a good way to study anatomy, but when you're actually creating a character or a creature, you have to think about what comes after that. You know, the fatty tissue, glands, veins, and of course, skin. Okay. So any musculature that you do, you have to think, right, well, there's going to be a layer of fat on that. You know, even if it's a small amount, there's always a layer of fat, and then there's going to be the skin itself. And all of this has thickness. So we have to take that into account when we're sculpting. And I'm going to show you a little trick here, and you can do this with any clay build-up brush or any brush that you want. So what's this? Those are some perky nipples. Thank you, Manic. You know, thank you. Let's just knock them back a bit. There we go. Okay, maybe it's a bit cold in ZBrush, who knows? Okay. So if you have any kind of build-up brush, clay build-up that you have, change the alpha. Now, in some cases, they won't have an alpha, so if they don't, simply turn on the alpha 62 and lower your intensity really low. And I'm going to show you on the deltoid here. You can already see that I've done a little bit of it here. But what I'm going to try and do here is just try to kind of suggest where it's how the skin is actually folding or kind of contouring across the surface of the body. And all I'm doing is using a back and forth stroke as I work my way around. So there's no need for a skin pore brush or anything like this. Now there's nothing wrong with those. Those are fantastic. But what I'm trying to show you here is that you can do a lot with the defaults inside a ZBrush. So I wish I could show you exactly the kind of, essentially I'm doing this. If you can see the camera, I'm doing that. All I'm doing is a slow stroke to the right and then overlapping to the left and back and forth, very, very softly, you know, barely touching the model. Whisk and flick, yeah, if you want to use that, you can. So we're barely touching it, barely touching the surface. And I'm following that around the deltoid, doing a really subtle overlap wherever I can. And I find this is a really great way of breaking up the skin on my characters, because I hate smooth looking characters. And I feel it adds a sense of realism. The swish and flick method. Okay. And you can see that that's really subtle. And then if we needed to, we could actually go into the smooth brush and very lightly just knock that back. And that is going to serve as a base for putting in more wrinkles. Hey, Firestorm Studio. We can put in more wrinkles using any of the brushes. Let's say, for example, we wanted to go in and be a bit more, do something a little bit more detailed, but we've got that base skin texture. So say we wanted to add a bit of a vein, just a little bit of an extra vein, just using this damn standard. Whenever you're doing veins or wrinkles, try not to do a straight line, okay? Because that's too artificial. So whenever you're doing something like a wrinkle or fold, try to add a bit of jitter. So jitter the brush as you're creating the stroke. Same goes for the vein. Like that. And you can see that when you zoom back out, that starts to look natural. It doesn't look artificial. There we go. All right, folks, what time are we at? Okay, we're about 40 minutes in. So I'm going to take a quick drink. And again, I'm just going to, if anyone does have any queries or questions, please shout out. And you can see that we've not even gotten through completing this. You can see that on the legs, we still have too much of the raw anatomy. We can see too much of the musculature, and particularly on the back here, in the back. This is looking too tense at the moment, so I would soften this back. Sorry, I would soften the back. I'll put it that way. That's a better way to put it. And you can do that using by adding the alpha, which one have we got again? Alpha 62 to your build-up brush, or you can use a rake brush. And this is a technique that I learned from Ryan Kingsling years ago. I have this book. I have this book basically called, the best ZBrush tips and tricks, and it's got all of the best ZBrush artists of the time who are still working today as well, just kind of going through and sharing a lot of their knowledge. And two of the kind of standout people in there are Paul Gabbery and Ryan Kingsling, and they've got some really, really great pieces of information in there. So the trick that Ryan shared in the book is very similar to what I just showed you here on the shoulder, but it's using the rake brush. And it's a little bit more controlled. So say, for example, so I've kind of blocked this in. You've got the lat muscle down here. Okay, where is it? Where's my paintbrush? Okay, folks, we're going to do a bit of, what's this? All right, I have a question. How would you tackle the way superheroes are done? All of them are at 0.001 body frame pat with skin so tight, it's in a corset, basically. how to tackle skin on that. Hi Pat, sorry I'm late, had power outage. Not at all, FBI, don't worry about that. We cannot control that. How would you tackle the way superheroes are done? Well, that's the thing. The way that superheroes are done is exactly that. They're supposed to look like living écorchés. That just seems to be the way. So generally what I would do in that case is, again, I would follow, so say for example, let's take the back here. So I would leave it, obviously, you would probably accentuate it even more. So what I would start to do is I would block out my anatomy the same way. And then I'm just going to block in something like this for the anatomy of the back. Right? Then I would take something like my trim dynamic and I would start to soften off the musculature after I've added a little bit of a layer of skin over the top. Right? So that's good. What that's going to do is we're essentially sanding down or smoothing back the detail, but not by such a harsh degree that we're going to lose the forms that we've made. Okay? Then I would take my inflate brush. I would start to kind of tighten them up together. Then maybe take the trim dynamic and I would start to add like a really, wait a minute, what's happened? Why is my ZBrush not reacting properly? Have I got the right brush? No, I don't. That's why. I would take something like trim dynamic and I would actually start to almost make the muscles look hard surface to really accentuate the differences between those. Okay. Something like that. And then if you were doing something along the lines of like clothing, etc. on top of them, well, you can do that in a few ways. Say, for example, we wanted a wrinkle of clothing. Well, you could take something like the trim dynamic, sorry, dam standard, and just, you could create really over-the-top wrinkles like this. Get the smooth brush up there. Okay. And then you just essentially apply the wrinkles of the material or their costume, just very tactically across the creature or the character. And then essentially you end up with an écorché that looks like it's covered in fabric. So almost using the costume of the superhero as their skin to contain all their muscles. It's definitely, I will not lie, it's not a style I actually really enjoy doing. It's why I've always liked the work of Alex Ross, the kind of the painter and the artist. I've always enjoyed his kind of more very grounded, realistic take on superheroes. Doesn't mean I don't enjoy kind of like your classical style as well, and I love all the sculptures that you see that are being done in that style are amazing. It's just not a style I tend to work in very often, but that's how I would approach it. So yeah, as I was saying, with what was I saying? Yeah, so with the back here, if we wanted to start blending it together a bit more, I can take the rake brush, and if we have something under here, we've got the lat muscle, and then we've got the teres major and minor just in this kind of area here. Okay, so that's your teres major and minor in there, and you've got your lat in here. Okay, so if I want to start blending them, let's make it really obvious. Okay, there we go. Okay, we can take the rake brush, and obviously I would highly recommend you check out Ryan Kingsling's way how he does this, because there's no way I can do it nearly as well as he can. But what he shows is essentially a crosshatch method. So you work the rake across the transition line of the muscle, and then you go in the opposite direction And you will generally need a much higher resolution mesh than I have here for this to really work. But once you're at that stage, you lower the size of your brush, and then you would repeat the process. And you would continue cross-hatching and lowering the brush each time, or the size of the brush each time. And what you basically end up with is a very natural looking surface finish. Now again, I don't have the resolution here to really make this, to do it justice, but when you step back, it'll start blending those muscle parts together. And then you would take a small low intensity smooth and just dust over the surface ever so slightly. You don't want to lose the detail completely. There we go. Okay, and if I step back now to where we were, because I'd already kind of started this on this but I've been using a bit more of an aggressive approach using this alpha brush. And what I'm doing is, again, I'm thinking about how the skin is actually flowing over the surface. So again, back and forth, changing the orientation of the brush as we get down, changing the pressure as well, and then overlapping as I curve around the lat here and the rib cage. Kind of round the lat like so, and I basically overlap those sections. And what it does is, it, again, similar to the rake method, it creates a natural effect for the skin. And then what I'll do as well with the brush is I can hold down the Alt key as well to kind of dig into the surface as well, and then overlay that again with strokes that I'm actually adding volume to the surface. Here's another good example. Across the spine, I can be a little bit more heavy-handed to fill in the gaps. Like so, as we work down the middle of the spine. And I will then smooth down some of the harshness a bit. Maybe increase my smooth brush a little bit, and then just work over the skin. And it is a layered approach, so you're probably going to remove some of the detail and then you can work back into that again. Okay, how are we doing? Okay, we're coming up on an hour, so we're going to start taking a look at our transpose. And when I'm using the smooth brush, I tend to use a smooth brush with a very low intensity, and obviously taking full advantage of pressure sensitivity. Okay. And I'm not going to lie, folks, I'm genuinely really enjoying working on this little dude. He's been a lot of fun to work on now that his face hasn't exploded. That was catastrophic. That was catastrophic for us. Let's give him a little belly button. He doesn't have one. Needs a navel. There we go. But let's reset the brush. Yeah, actually, and if you were not aware of that, if your brush is just not behaving the way you expect, or you want to get it back to a certain effect that it had, if you've been changing settings, just go to brush, scroll right down to the bottom and choose reset current brush, and that'll just reset it for you, and you'll be able to go about your business as usual. So I'm just going to give him, and again, even though this is something I want to point out too, he is a skinny little creature. He doesn't have a lot of body fat, but take a look at the abdominals. Okay. Yes, some people have, crazy, stacked abdominals. Okay. I'm not going to say that people don't, but if you're trying to go for a more realistic creature, then you have to be a little bit more subtle with the abdominal area. And also, a good thing as well is to do the abdominals asymmetrically if you're going for realism. Because that will just make it look more real. It'll take it away from the kind of superhero approach. Obviously, if you're doing a superhero, then, although to be fair, Daniel Bell, who I think is one of the best in the world in general in terms of sculpting, I adore the way he does like abdominals on his superhero characters, because he does go for the most part, he goes for a more asymmetrical approach. His stuff's amazing, so definitely worth checking out. But yeah, so I do hope everyone's enjoyed kind of this different approach to the kind of creature sculpt. By all means, like I said, if you'd rather we went back to the more let's start from scratch approach every time, and then just threw one of these in every so often, then that's fine. Let us know in the Discord. You'll find all the details, by the way, for all of the socials for Firestorm Studios in the bottom banner of the stream. So please do check it out and come along and stalk us. In a good way, obviously, not in a bad way. But it's a really great community over at the Firestorm Discord, and you'll all be very welcome. So please do jump in. You also get a chance to occasionally hang out with the Firestorm team if you're interested in that. A lot of us are generally in the voice chat channels, if and when we can, basically. Okay, so let's just add a bit more. Okay, I have to be really careful because when I get into the more detailing side of things, I can just get lost, and it's one of the reasons that we do the quick studies on our stream. What's this? I've seen someone use the IMM torso armed leg brushes that have like really detailed pre-made limbs and bodies to make characters and creatures. Yes, you can do that. Let me quickly save this guy, and I'll show you all what Manic is talking about. So yeah, if you're kind of, you can Frankenstein together a character if you want. Okay, so let's give ourselves an object to work from. So the way that this works is we're going to use the IMM B parts or body part insert mesh brush. Now, insert mesh brushes will only work if you have a mesh to insert them into. So for example, let's take the male head here, and I can draw it out, scale it up, rotate it into place, and there we go. So we have a head on a stick, but we can also then go in and draw out a torso. And what will happen is every single time you insert one of these meshes, ZBrush is going to automatically mask out everything else, and it's going to allow you to work on the object that you're working with to block out what you need. So we can see there. And now I can probably get rid of the cylinder because I've got everything I need now. So to do that, I'm going to hit the Shift F hotkey, and that's going to bring up my polyframe. Now I'm going to go to Auto Groups, which if you're looking for it, you'll actually find it here in the tool palette under Polygroups, Auto Groups, okay? Obviously I have mine on my custom shelf, but you'll find it here under Tool, Auto Groups, okay? Now, if I hold down Control Shift, make sure that I have the Select Rectangle option. If you have the Select Lasso highlighted, you're not going to be able to control your polygroups as easily, okay? So make sure that you have the Select Rectangle chosen. Now I can get rid of the cylinder by selecting it, and then going to Delete Hidden. Now I can use the same approach to tweak the location and potentially size of the head. There we go. And now, because we've got our body and our torso, which is not looking good, that should be probably about there. We've got our body and our torso, we can start adding other parts. Say, for example, male full arm. Turn on symmetry. And start putting that into place. And as you get more comfortable with creating characters or creatures, you can make your own versions of these, okay? You can make your own versions of these. So you can cut up any character you make into parts and then make your own brush. So yeah. So there we go. So you can do that. And then let's say, for example, we take the head here, bring it down. It looks a bit weird, I'm not going to lie. I'm just going to do a mirror and weld. There we go. So because I've rushed it, I've actually knocked it off the symmetry a bit, not a big deal. And now if I was to go to geometry, we can dynamesh it together. Mirror and weld. And now we have a character to work from. Very quickly. There we go. So yeah, so there's loads of different ways. You don't have to use a sphere, you don't have to use Z-spheres, you don't have to use a base mesh. You can make all sorts of cool stuff from some of the brushes. Okay, what's this? What else have I missed in the chat here? I think using this is fine, but using the pre-made fully detailed measuring to claim it's made by them is what feels odd to me. Okay. I'm going to have a quick look at this, see what you mean. Oh, I see what you mean. Okay. I know what you mean, Manic. I know what you mean. As long as you announce that you've used a brush kit or you've kit bashed it, then I think it's okay. Because it's these brushes that people make that are like different creatures and stuff. The idea is that it's to get you started somewhere. And it can be really useful for concept artists to do paint overs and things like that. But you're right, as long as you announce what you've used and you've been very open and you've credited the artist accordingly, then I see no issue with using these kind of packs in order to get certain jobs done. And a lot of the time in commercial situations where time is of the essence, these kind of things will be used quite frequently. But yes, I agree. You have to announce it. And that's the thing, folks. If you're using pre-made parts or a base mesh, hey, even if you've used a bit of AI, just announce it. Okay, make sure people are aware how you've made the work, and it just keeps you in the right and it stands you in good stead. All right, so it's why anytime I use a material or a model or a brush, I try to remember and credit the artists. Okay, because it's important, because people are out there doing great work, making our lives as artists easier and faster. All right, so let's jump back to our macaque. Now, if you all remember, we had a block out done with our character's pose. Okay? And this is kind of what we want to do. We want to get our macaque that we have at the moment, and we want to get him into this pose. So I'm going to bring up the original reference image, and we're now going to take a look at how we can get him into this pose using the transpose master. And unfortunately, folks, this is where I'm going to get I'm going to sound like a stuck record, and I'm going to sound like a bit of a nag because I'm going to point out certain workflow things that I find are really important that you have to follow in order to make sure that you're successful in doing this. So, are we scaling up the pose or shrinking the sculpt? I think we're going to scale up the pose, folks. We'll maybe do a bit of both. Actually, do you know what? I'm going to make that decision by appending a cube. We're going to scale up the pose. So what we'll do then, and this is the thing, the first thing we can look at is we'll look at a couple of ways that we can scale up multiple objects or transform multiple objects directly in ZBrush. So I'm going to turn off my dynamic perspective camera here, and you'll see that I have 4 subtools in my list. I have my pose block, which has all the different parts that we worked on the last time. So a couple of Z-spheres, and we have a block out. Now, Z-spheres don't like to be scaled en masse, okay? When you create an object in ZBrush, your Z-sphere scale, the idea is that you're just getting the pose or the character in the right place, and then if it needs to be bigger afterwards, you have to scale it up or turn it into an adaptive skin and then scale it up. Or alternatively, you make the Z-sphere bigger at the beginning, okay? It is possible, but it's a very messy approach and it's not a very quick one. So you're better off with Z-spheres just creating the character at the scale that you want. Or, as I said, turning it into an adaptive skin and then scaling afterwards. Okay. So with that in mind, I'm going to hide some parts for the time being. So we do have a mesh that we made, which has the pose, but I kind of want to keep some of this as well. I'm going to try and pick which one I like the best. I think I like this one, but it doesn't have the nicest pose, as in adaptive skin. You can see it's a little bit messy. So what we'll do instead is we're going to go down to unified skin, and we're going to make a unified skin. Now, what this does is it makes a much more direct translation of your Z-sphere, so you get the original shape, okay? And then that way it's going to work quite well. And now I can go in and get rid of any parts I don't need. And I don't need to smooth this out, but I will anyway. Deformation, polish by features. There we go. So that means that I can now I can append this back in. So we'll append it in. It means I can get rid of the skeleton here. For our Z-sphere. I'm going to pop that into the folder again, and I'm going to do the same with this one, just in case, and just to kind of repeat what I've already done. So I'm going to take this one here, go down to Unified Skin, and hit Make Unified Skin. I don't mind about the settings, I just want a version of the character. So there we go. So it looks a bit creepy, because it's all skinny and things, but it's totally fine because it's just a reference, all right? So again, we will append that in. So that one? Yeah, it's that one. Okay, pop that in there, and then I can delete my Z-spheres. So now I've got a couple of different variants. This one I'm going to leave individual, but as I said, we want to now scale this up to the size of our macaque. So I'm going to take my ground plane and I'm going to pop it into this folder. Now I'm going to go into the settings, so this little cog icon on the folder, and I'm going to choose transpose set. What will happen is any character that's not, or any object that's not in this folder is going to go kind of this, what I would call scan lines, okay? This is like the old scan lines from old televisions, all right? That's the kind of what I call it. And what that means is that it's essentially masked out and it's inactive. So it now means I can move all of these objects at once, and I can scale them, and I can even rotate them if I need to, all right? So all I'm going to do now is roughly scale this to where I think it needs to be. That looks about right. Yeah, that looks about right. We'll move it down so that his feet are on the front. And there we go. Okay, now, as soon as I hit the W key or the move tool or switch out of it, it's going to turn off the transpose set. All right, and now I'm going to save my scene again. And this is definitely something where you're going to want to save a lot. Okay, you're going to want to save iteratively. And when we get into the posing of the character, we're going to want to actually save Z projects as well. Okay, now to make everything really clean, I'm going to go into my tool palette and I'm going to hit this R button, Restore Configuration. What it means is it will essentially hide all of the other subtools that I've been working on, or any of the unified skins that I've made, just to keep it nice and tidy. However, if I go into here, you'll find that they're still in that scene file. All right. Okay. Now that everything is scaled, I'm going to reposition everything, get it back into the position that it needs to be, and I'm going to do another save. So there we go. Excellent. Right. Now comes the fun part. Now comes the fun part. And this is where things can get a little bit hard to what's the best way to put this? Things can become confusing very quickly when you're posing one part of a model and not the other, okay? So there's a lot of masking going on and things. So that is why whenever we're using the T-pose mesh and the T-pose sub-T or the transpose master system, you want to take your time with it, okay? Do not rush this part, because as soon as you rush it, that's when it's going to go wrong. And if you've never used this system before, prepare for the inevitability that you're going to have to redo this. Okay, maybe once or twice, because you will make a mistake here or there. It's just natural. It's a natural part of learning a new skill, is you're going to screw it up once, twice, three times. I cannot tell you how many times I messed up the transpose system while I was learning ZBrush. Okay, and even to this day, as evidenced from a couple of weeks ago, I made a total blunder, and I didn't think about the mode I was in, and I hit the mirror and weld. And when I did that, it broke my transpose. And when I came back, the head collapsed. And this is why we're doing this for this live stream. Okay, right, folks. So what I'm going to do here, and this is an important thing to remember, whenever you use transpose, make sure that everything you want to work with is actually scaled. Now, do you notice the mistake I made? Right? I've actually not scaled up all the parts because they were not visible, they were not turned on when I scaled up the model. So we're going to have to redo that. But this is the only downside. This is something I would quite like to see as an update in ZBrush, is the ability to undo, like transpose the set and undo it in one go, because now I have to go back and undo everything to a certain size. There we go. That one's gone missing. There we go. Okay, now everything is in the right size. We'll grab the ground and we'll undo that as well. I mean, actually, to be fair, the ground is fine. It's just the these guys that we need to fix. So we'll transpose set again, bring them down, and then we'll scale them up. Okay, and we'll save again. But yeah, this is the thing. Whenever possible, folks, don't rush this kind of work. Just take your time with it and enjoy it, particularly if it's your personal work. Take your time and enjoy it. So I'm going to make sure that everything is visible. Everything has an eyeball turned on, because when I go into the transpose master mode, I need to make sure that all of my point orders are taken into account, because that's essentially what this is doing. ZBrush looks at everything in the scene, combines it into one mesh so that we can work with it, and then when we come back and we separate it into multiple meshes, ZBrush needs to be able to link one to the other. And if something changes, i.e. you end up hitting the mirror and weld and changing the point order, then ZBrush doesn't know how to reverse it. It doesn't know how to link it back and forth, okay? So with all that set, I'm going to go into Z plugin, down to transpose master, and turn and hit T-pose mesh. Okay, it's going to say it's complete. And now I have one mesh in my subtool palette, but if I go into the polyframe, I have individual polygroups, which we can hide as we need to, okay? And that's going to be the key thing here. And this is where it can become quite confusing, because we're going to have to hide certain parts of the mesh and mask everything out, and then mask out our character body while we pose things, okay? Now, there isn't necessarily, I could of course just pose the character and then reference the pose somewhere else, but I want to show you a kind of worst case scenario for this, something that's really kind of clunky and difficult to work with, all right? So I'm making this as difficult as I can for myself, just to kind of help you hopefully understand how this system works a little bit better. So I find it easier to turn off the dynamic perspective camera for this, okay? And what I'm going to do, I'm going to hold down Control and Shift, click on my character, like so, invert him, and then I'm going to mask him out. Bring everything back, and then I'm going to show him as he is. So we're going to make sure he is unmasked and everything else is masked. So now I can move him around, we can rotate him, we can do all sorts of cool stuff with him, and nothing else is affected, okay? And this is where it can get a bit tricky, because what I now want to do is I want to get him into this pose. So I'm going to have to now start thinking about, well, how am I going to get him into this pose when I don't have a rig in him? So the way I approach it is I tend to think of it, if I move him back, I think to myself, right, if we do it in a, bottom to top kind of position, right, first of all, he needs to basically bend at the ankle. Okay, so if he needs to bend at the ankle, I'm going to mask out his ankles. I'm going to soften it, and then I'm going to go into my move tool. Now you can do this any way you want. You can use the gizmo tool, or you can use the transpose line. Okay, so I'm going to use the transpose master line, and I'm going to rotate him at his ankles, like so. Okay, he's doing a little bit of a Michael Jackson lean. He's asking Annie if she's okay. This is also the most ominous thing I think I might have ever created. I mean, look at that. That's just terrifying. So now I think to myself, right, well, what's the next part that's going to be rotated? Okay, well, it's going to be his knees. So I'm going to go now and mask out the knees. And I'm working my way up the body. So I'm going to soften that out, and I'm going to do the same. I'm going to rotate. Sorry, I'm going to grab my transpose line and rotate the knees back. Next, Haha, that's not looking safe for work, that is. So the next thing I'm going to do is he's going to be rotating at the hips. Okay. It's very cursed, but this is one of the best ways I find to understand this stuff. So we're going to mask out the legs now. And you're going to get broken parts of your model. Just prepare yourself for that. You're going to have to resculpt when you use this mode. Now, I can rotate him round. And this is where it can get a little bit harder, because now I have to get in and mask at the midsection, okay? And I'm not going to lie, folks, I deliberately did it in this way so that there was some funny clips and reels that we can record for it, okay? So I'm going to soften this out like that. Again, softening the mask. This is another reason why we want low topology, because masking it out and softening that mask is going to be far easier with much more controlled topology. Now we're going to draw out our transpose line. Bring that into the middle of the body. And I'm going to bring that over like so. And I'm not going to go all the way, so I'm going to bring it about here. Okay, actually, do you know what? I think we need to remove some of that. There we go. And then we'll just bring that down a bit further. Oh, there we go. But see, I've been using the transpose line for years and I still mess it up. So don't worry about it. And if you hate the transpose line, just use the gizmo. It's no big deal. So do a bit of that. And then we can move that up a bit further. I'm actually going to go in with the mask pen here. Oh, see, this is what I mean by it can get tricky, because sometimes you'll have to hide parts to get into certain sections. There we go. And then we'll just rotate that further down. There we go. Now, this is what I was meaning. You can see the rib cage is really having a hard time, but I'm actually okay with that, because that's actually giving me a guide as to where I know I'm going to actually add some compression for the skin and the abdominals as it pushes into the bony landmark at the top of the rib cage. Okay, that's why I've left that bit quite harsh, because I want to keep that bony landmark in there. Okay. So I've unmasked it. I'm just going to take a quick look and see how it's working. Now I think what I can do, we switch back to the gizmo. I'm going to mask everything except that. There we go. This time I'm going to move these guys out the way. And then we're going to move our character into place. Okay, now what you can also do here is you can add your own polygroups to this. You can polygroup this while you're working in this mode. So what that allows me to do is I can mask out the elbow area like so, and I can maybe also just mask out the head area just to give me an easier way to grab. Maybe the knees could rotate out slightly from that. They will, Manic. So something to point out here, folks, is we're doing this in stages. At the moment, we just want the creature to get into that primary pose of getting him crouching. We're not looking for any smaller adjustments to make it look a bit more realistic. At the moment, we just want to control our mesh and get it into the pose. It's exactly the same as if you're doing your primary forms for a sculpt. You start with the basic, most obvious shape you need. Then you start to layer it. You build it up in layers, folks, okay? Again, everything will look creepy, unhinged, cursed, which is a great way to describe it, tiramisu. Cursed, okay? Everything's going to look really weird at the beginning, but as long as you take your time and you block it out in stages, you'll be able to pose anything you want in ZBrush. Absolutely anything, but you have to think about how people get into certain poses, which is why I've done it this way. We bend at the ankle, then the knee, then the hip, then obviously the spine, then the neck, okay? So, we know that he's kind of in the position he needs to be, almost, right? But we need a little bit more curve here in the spine. So what I'll do, grab these parts, and this is going to allow me to get round the arm like so, like that, and then we can add the arm in. I'm going to use the gizmo just to show you. To get the reason I don't like the gizmos much is I find it harder to get the right pivot point. There we go. And he's got his shoulders kind of hunched, so his neck's actually going to come down. So we're probably actually at the right position there, and then he's going to be hunched, so his shoulders are actually, we're going to have to bring his shoulders up, so his scapula are going to go in this direction, okay, eventually. But his head needs to probably rotate a little bit as well. So let's just get this into position. Again, folks, if I'm doing anything that's taking a bit, if it's a little bit confusing to see, let me know in the chat. We will repeat it. Okay? Transpose is not an easy thing to work with in ZBrush, all right? But it's very powerful. And this is what I would say, right? ZBrush, I know ZBrush gets a bad rap for having a bad UI and weird things that it does, the way it does things, but it does things for a reason most of the time, okay? And once you learn how that system works, it's an incredibly powerful system to have, okay? And I know it can be frustrating jumping between different software packages a lot of the time, but one thing I would say is that if you're able to adapt to jumping between Blender and ZBrush and Maya and Substance Painter and Rism, if you can jump between them and they've all got different ways of doing things, it's a great way to learn how to be adaptable in any situation when it comes to a 3D pipeline, okay? That is your biggest strength, all right? Your best skill is adaptability, okay? And you need to train that the same way that you train your sculpting technique or your drawing technique or your painting technique, all right? So keep that in mind, folks. So I'm going to use his ear in the picture as an example of how high his hand is. There we go. So this isn't perfect by any means, but we're getting there. So now I think I can safely move this guy way out of the way over there. Okay, now we have to start tweaking it. We're going to start changing some of the, because at the moment it's just a symmetrical crouch pose, but it's pretty clean, okay? Now, before we move on, let's talk about saving. The way I've always taught ZBrush with this mode is to not save in this mode, okay? So you're all familiar with going up to Save As and then saving a Z tool. But be very aware, you won't be able to see my save window, okay? But when you save something in ZBrush from this mode, it will save it as one mesh. So all of your subdivisions and all of your individual meshes, that will be gone if you save it as a Z tool. And if you save it as a Z tool, close down ZBrush, and then open it back up, you won't be able to revert back. ZBrush will get rid of the data. Okay? At the moment, this is all stored in ZBrush's memory. When you close it, it disappears. So in order to retain that information and retain this information here, this information in memory, make sure that you go up to File, Save As, and save a Z project file. Then ZBrush will save the data, okay, and you'll be able to revert back if you want to. However, my recommendation for using this system is if you need to stop what you're doing, or you need to take a break and you need to close ZBrush, is to go back to the T-pose sub-T mode. Okay, so revert back to individual meshes and then save the file. Then when you open it back up, you can jump back in and continue where you were. All right, so what I mean by that is that I'm going to make sure that everything is visible, nothing is masked, and I'm going to go to Z plugin, transpose master, T-pose sub-T. Okay, now everything's been moved, but I now retain all of my subdivisions and my low subdivisions, and you'll see the mess that it's kind of made in this area. Now, what I can do here is I can actually go in and I can start to smooth out some of the areas that got a little bit messed up. Okay, so I can fix the volumes as needed. You're probably going to get quite a lot of issues at areas like this, so we're going to have to do a little bit of extra work just to inflate these bits here. Good thing it's going to be covered with fur. I would go in and fix that, but I don't want this to get banned on Twitch, or YouTube. So, see, what I should have done, folks, is I should have made polygroups so that I could get into the leg areas that are now intersecting with the body. So I'm going to have to do this the harder way, but that's fine because that's what these streams are about. You guys getting to see the when things go wrong. That's way more informative than when things go right. Okay, as much as you might see your hosts kind of die a little inside when everything breaks, it's good content for you. So I'm going to isolate out my mesh like that. I'm going to turn on double, and now I can kind of work my way in, just hiding parts. Never underestimate the power of polygroups. So now I'm going to start smoothing out the bits that I can, like so. And if I need to, I will move parts as well. You need to have quite a lot of patience to smooth things to pose in ZBrush. Okay, so there we go. And we don't need to completely fix the intersections because sometimes it's going to help us, right? So there we go. That's more than enough. There we go. And I can also use this chance to fix some of the anatomy that the transpose line just doesn't allow you to do. You need quite a lot of patience while ZBrushing. That is true. But yeah. Thanks, Dennis. Good to see you. Thanks for coming along. So now I can get a more natural curve to the spine. And again, because of the type of character we have, we don't actually need to go into the T-pose mesh mode again, we could technically do a lot of the extra work here on this singular mesh, but, well, you wouldn't be learning about T-pose then if we did, so we're going to go back in. And I'm also going to bring this up here because we want a bit more compression. We can use the inflate brush. I'm just going to also notice that my polygroups are gone. That's something to remember, is that the polygroups, when you create them in the T-pose mode, they don't come back over, okay? So let's add a little bit in here, just a bit more compression. There we go. So again, he's a skinny wee guy, but he's still, his fat still has to move somewhere. His skin has to go somewhere. This is the thing. This is why, when you understand how like the body works in that way, in terms of like skin having to roll and things, it makes you even more aware of how heavily things are photoshopped these days. To get remove skin folds and little bits of flab that are totally normal on people. It's quite frustrating, to be honest, when you see that. So there we go. Now I'm going to make a little bit of an adjustment here, just in the ribcage area. There we go, just soften that off a little bit. But I am not going to knock it back. I like that. I like the fact that we've given ourselves a nice guide now for some wrinkles. Like this, some nice compression. And again, there's nothing wrong with adding it here at this stage, making a few changes, and then going back in. Okay. Right. Now, we've also got a bit of an issue with the knees, so I'm going to fix the anatomy of the legs and the knees here. See, this is where we need the polygroups. So we're going to look at how to add that in. Now, hopefully, let's see how well the Z-remesh did. It didn't do very well. We have a spiral. We have lots of spirals. There we go. There's no. Okay, so we're going to do this the rough and ready way. We're just going to do something like this and polygroup it. There we go. That'll make things a bit easier. Watching this is me want to do another figure study for practice. It's one of the best things you can do. Figure studies, very useful. Interesting. Sorry about that, folks. I just got a good old Windows notification. Everybody loves those, right? Why is that doing this? I'm not getting my smooth brush. Why? Okay, weird. Let me just reset my brush here, folks. Wait a minute. Oh, that is still working. Reset current brush. Sorry, folks. Something is broken on my keyboard. Not ideal. Oh, I see what I've done. Okay, sorry. 2 seconds, folks. I just need to. I've realised that when I hit Shift, it's going to my move brush. I need to change that back to smooth. I do that a lot, actually. Okay, so let's get this smoothed into place. Make a few changes. How are we doing for time? Okay, we're 1 hour and 35. Not too bad. Gonna smooth all this out. I'm gonna have to fix this. Sorry, folks. Sorry, Twitch. Sorry, YouTube. I gotta fix it. It's bugging me. And sorry to Firestorm if I get us flagged. Okay. So back into perspective mode, let's check the higher res details. Again, another good kind of win in the column for good topology or retopology. ZBrush allows you to make changes, large sweeping changes at the lower subdivisions, and then when you step up, you're still going to retain all of the nice detail that you've sculpted. You will still have to do a little bit of adjustment, but for the most part, it'll still be there. So, okay, this isn't overly accurate, I'm not going to lie, but it looks okay. There we go. Right, so we'll now do a save, now that we're out of the T-pose mesh mode. So we're safe to save it. Okay. So let's go back in. T-pose, but this time, I don't need my reference. So I'm going to hide it. But I have to be sure. In fact, you know what? I'm going to leave it on, because sometimes when you hide it, the T-pose mesh gets a bit upset when you're moving back and forth. So we'll make sure that we leave that on, but we will move it out to the side when we get in. So T-pose mesh. And then we'll just grab this character and just move him away. Oops, I grabbed some of the environment as well and get him out of the way. So I have the reference photography as well that I'm using, so I'm going to focus on using that. Now, let's see, what do we now need to do? Oh, hello. Let's maybe move him into a different place, shall we? There we go. Put him under the water. All right. So the next thing that we need is the arms. So we need to actually shrug the shoulders up, okay? And again, whenever you're posing a character, look at the real locomotion of animals or creatures. Try out the pose yourself if it's a character or like a biped, and try and figure out, right, well, what moves when I raise my shoulders? You know, I need to shrug, so what's actually moving? In that case, it's going to be our scap and our clavicles, okay? So, but obviously our arms are going to follow along because they're attached. So we will, first of all, we'll make a couple of masks around here. Get our symmetry on, like so. And then let's go in and take that mask pen, and we'll now refine our mask. So there's going to be some teres major, there's going to be a bit of lat work in there as well, so we want to just overlap that ever so slightly. I love doing poses myself, especially when something has like 6 arms. Spawning extra arms is difficult, but doable. I like your dedication, Tiramisu. I really do. I mean, that takes true dedication to literally sprout extra arms just to make sure that your pose is spot on. I like it. You know, I do like that. That's cool. The other thing to remember as well is that, you know, don't just think about the back. Think about what's happening at the front. So as we raise up our scap, we're going to have some movement in the chest area as well, both both parts of the pec, so the upper and the major and the minor muscle. So I will always try to include that a bit and then just soften it so that we're moving a fair amount. And then if there's any area I don't want to move, I will mask it back out. But to be fair, we need the traps to move up as well because they need to compress against the neck. So there's quite a lot that's going to move here. And the same as when you're posing this, you may get it wrong, okay? You might get this wrong. So I'm going to go into the gizmo. I'm going to hold down Alt and tap. And again, I can use my transpose line, actually. Do you know what? I think I'm going to use a gizmo because I think more people will actually prefer to use that. So, I mean, I don't like using it, but I will adapt that just as needed. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to find a way to rotate it because I don't want to move it. I don't want to just take the scap and do that with it because that's not ideal. Wherever possible, we want to rotate it, and it's going to kind of hinge from round about the middle. And one thing I'll point out is that putting the gizmo or the transpose line in exactly the same anatomical location will not always give you the right result in ZBrush. So there's a little bit of moving around that you might have to do. There we go. See, that's working quite well. Okay. But you'll see me on the camera adjusting my scapula because I'm trying to figure out how, what's the best way. So we don't want to just position it and move it. I want to add rotation if I can. There we go. A little bit of rotation to get that shrugged up. And now he looks like he's shrugging. But what's wrong? His neck's collapsing in. So I'm going to have to be a bit harsher with my mask. And then try again. There we go. We'll adjust the lats. Well, actually, no, we're going to fix the lats in a minute. Okay. So we're now starting to run out of adjustment areas. So I'm just going to clean this up. And I have already committed a sin. I'm starting to smooth and sculpt in this mode. Big mistake. Okay. But one thing I want to point out here is because of the way that the geometry is going to work, because we don't actually have physical simulation for muscle here, the geometry is just going to do what it does. It's going to move in the way. It's not going to compress the way or slide the way that muscle, bone, and fat do. So we have to add that in ourselves. So I'm going to add a little bit of a shrug in here. So we've still got a line kind of coming up here from the neck. I'm going to smooth it out. There we go. We're going to get some compression at the back of the head as well, because all that skin on the neck is going to be pushed up and out. And you can either just use something like the move brush to do this, or you can sculpt it. It's entirely up to yourself. I'm also going to use this time to just fix the upper spine because I didn't really do much there. And I'm not sure if it's going to show on the screen or not, but I'll zoom in and show you. This is bad, but this is from the Z-Remesher, okay? You don't want this. This here, where you have a star or a pole, however you want to call it, if you have that in your geometry, you shouldn't have it, okay? I believe that there is no perfect topology, but this to me is a hard and fast no rule. You do not want to have your points merging in this way at the center point of a character, okay? There will be a few caveats depending on what you're optimizing your mesh for, but in the main, as in 99.9% of the time, don't have this on your model, okay? You would want to fix this by looping it round, okay? And then coming across like that, and then looping this around into what's known as a sidewalk, okay? So once that's done, I can look at it and go, yeah, that's working quite well. Let's bring everything back, see how we're doing, and let's get the arm now into the right position. Sorry about the weird camera here, folks. This just happens when you've got large objects in ZBrush. Okay. It's just the way that the camera system's working, really. Okay, let's go into the mask lasso. And now let's start working. Same idea, but we're going to work about the deltoid. Change my mask to the mask pen. How are we doing? Oh wow, we've got quite a lot of people today. Lots of people today. Okay, folks, well, it's that time again. We're actually coming up on almost 2 hours, but I think we're probably going to have to go over a little bit today in order to complete all the things that we wanted to complete. So hopefully no one minds if we go over a little bit. But I'm going to do my usual spiel, folks. So for everyone that's been watching for the past almost 2 hours, I'd like to thank you all for coming along and yeah, just hanging out with us today. Everyone here at Firestorm Studios really appreciates it. We really do, and we all enjoy kind of sharing our knowledge with everyone of our viewers. So please do remember to check out all of the links in the banner below. Follow us on all the socials and make sure to come and join us over on the Discord. And in fact, this Thursday at 1 p.m. UTC, we're myself and Heather are going to be doing live portfolio reviews. So please be sure to check that out over on the Discord, and you can sign up and have your portfolio reviewed. Now, obviously, we're going to get through as many as we can. So if you submit and we don't go through your work, we will probably be able to get to you on another time. Okay, but we'll get through as many as we can in the time slot that we have available. All right. And if you have any kind of queries or questions about that, again, jump over to the Discord and ask away. All right. Okay, so let's just mask out this bit of the pec a bit more. I'm going to leave a bit of room underneath the armpit and on the lat, and then just soften that off. I'm going to use the transpose line for this because it's just easier. Sometimes easier to visualize as well. And I'm going to bring this to the elbow. Bring it to the center. There we go. Now, this is where I'm pretty sure his outer leg is definitely angled out. So we have to be a bit careful. But you'll see that the rotation of the shoulder is in completely the wrong place. So let's bring that out a little bit more. See if that fixes it. This is what I was meaning. Sometimes you just do not get the look that you want. So I'm going to mask out a little bit more of the trapezius. So we get a cleaner break in the deltoid. Like that. Let's move that down, that pivot. That's a bit softer, that's looking nicer. And what you may sometimes have to do when you're posing in ZBrush is move it as well. You might have to just move in order to get a much cleaner rotation. And you'll never get it in one go, or you'll rarely get the pose you need in one go. You're going to have to reposition your gizmo or your transpose line and get that closer into the body. Okay, so we're going to unmask, and now we're going to do a little bit of fixing just to clean up the chest and the clavicles. These are key areas that you're going to have to resculpt. Generally, kind of any area in the, that's going to compress next to each other, you can see that the geometry is folded in on itself. So we can kind of smooth that down to give the impression that it's compressing together. And then I can use the inflate brush to do the same. Okay. Now again, I keep doing this in the T-pose mesh mode. I really shouldn't, but okay. All right, there we go. So let's go back to T-pose sub-T. And I'm going to have a look and see how much I like. Yeah, there we go. And the back is going to be XCSR. Hi, how are you doing? A quick hello back. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to start tweaking the overall shape of this to get the pose right. So we want a bit more of an arch in the back. And you'll see that obviously all of that musculature is going to disappear because it's now stretched out. We're not going to see it as clearly. And obviously the clavicles are going to be up. And hide the ground for the time being. And let's also just bring these clavicles in a bit more. Not clavicles, sorry, the delts in a bit. Get them a bit more rounded because he's rounding over his shoulders. I'm going to take the inflate brush and just close up the gap here with the arm. Okay, now, before we go in, I'm actually going to mask out the arm here, but we're going to use the mask lasso. I'm going to mask up to about here, and then I'm going to go into the masking, and I'm going to choose grow mask. And I'm going to sharpen it as I go. So growing, sharpening, and keep doing that until I get to the area I need to be. That should do. I could probably bring it back again, but I think that's all right. And then I'll hit Control W, and now I have a polygroup for the arm. Okay, so need a little bit more of a change here. I'm just going to maybe a bit too much expansion for the body. So we want to create that curve, but try and keep his volume consistent. Let's tuck the butt kind of tucks in a little bit as well, so we'll tuck that in. Let's just hide the arms. So yeah, so I'm going to mask out the lower leg so that I can tuck this in a bit more. There we go. And the thing to remember as well, folks, is that this can take a long time to really get this looking good. So don't be disheartened if it doesn't look great the first time or as soon as you start, okay? It's not going to look perfect. Okay. So I'm going to do the same thing with the legs, with the masking. So let's first of all do this, and then we'll do the same with the mask. I'm going to grow that up, sharpen it, grow the mask, sharpen it, and keep doing that. Because we're going to have to move the legs out. Okay, hit Control W, and now we have polygrids for the arms and the legs and the body. And while I'm at it, I'm just going to do a really quick one for the head. There we go. And do another save. So, let me see here. Japanese macaque, Z-Tool, 46, and version 47. All right. Okay, folks. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to literally take a 2-minute break, and we will be back. And when we come back, we're going to look at how to get that arm into position. And we're also going to look at refining the shape of the feet, bending the toes over, and then try and finesse the character and see how long that takes us to do. So give me 2 minutes and I'll be right back. Don't go anywhere. All right, folks, and we're back. We are back. I needed another cup of tea. I needed another cup of tea. My other one had went cold. So, where were we? We have a very sad-looking little monkey. Okay. All right, so I'm just going to add in a cheeky little extra amount of folds just onto his belly. And what I'm also going to do here is I'm just going to sculpt in a little bit more compression here, just at the pec. I'm going to try and change how this all sits. So to do that, I'm going to have to mask out this area here and then invert it and then just move that back in ever so slightly. Although why are we interested? Oh, oops, wrong brush. There we go. Oh, I've done it again. Done it again with the there we go. Sorry folks, I keep messing up my smooth brush. There we go. So let's move this back in a little bit. And then see how that looks. That's better. And I'm going to cheat here. I'm going to grab the skin folds brush. Just make my life a bit quicker. Actually, that's not worked the way I wanted to. So I'm instead going to use the dam standard, sorry, for this. I think. There we go. That's more like it. That's what we wanted. Just a bit more. All my brushes have went a bit crazy here. Where are we? Pap clean up. There we go. Interesting. All right. Okay. Going to fix up the shoulders again, fix the anatomy. You're constantly going to be doing that. Whenever you're doing a pose, you're going to constantly have to shift and adjust the anatomy of your character. It's just how it has to be, I'm afraid. Because however you do the anatomy and sculpt the musculature in an A pose, it's going to completely change when you actually start putting the character into a pose. One of the best books. I wish I could. I say that's one of the best books. Can't actually remember the name of it. But what I will do is I will put it in the Discord, the Firestorm Discord. But it's a kind of dynamic muscle movement book, and it's about. It showcases what happens to all the muscles in the body when you're going through exercises. And it's a really great way to see the mechanics of the musculature of the body when it's actually doing something rather than just standing kind of sedentary and still. Okay. I'm going to bring up these muscles a bit. It's going to make them pop out a little bit more. All right. Now we're going to start breaking the symmetry a bit. So we're going to bring in our environment. And I'm going to see, oof, look at that. That is bad. Didn't spot that. Look how bad the knees are. They need fixed. Pronto. Pronto. Okay. So our legs weren't actually finished. So this is where I would probably go in and just actually start completely re-sculpting. But for our purposes, I am just going to do this fairly quickly so that we can get on to the rest of the pose. Because like I said, you're going to constantly have to readjust the anatomy anyway. So, okay. So we're going to take this leg here. I'm going to soften it because I still want a bit of movement in the buttock as it twists, right? So I'm going to take my gizmo tool. I'm going to snap it to the bottom of the ankle here, or the heel, sorry, and I'm just going to rotate it. I'm going to rotate that out, like so. Now, that is giving me a decent amount of compression, kind of. It's again, it's not a simulation, so I am going to just move that out ever so slightly. Okay. And then I'm going to try and ignore the knees, by the way, folks, because it's bugging me at the moment. I'm not going to lie. It's bugging me. I'm desperate to fix it, but for the greater good, we'll ignore it. So now that that's done, I can take the arm and we can actually now start to fix this arm a little bit and start bending it where it needs to bend. So we're going to rotate it down a bit, and then I'm going to take the elbow like so, invert it, and then I'm going to use my transpose line, get that roughly into position. Oops, there we go. Rotate it round and see how well all that's working. I may again have to move it ever so slightly. That's okay. And then we're going to do a bit of a twist. And generally when I do a twist in the forearm, if I'm doing a twist in ZBrush, I will actually mask up a little bit further just so that we get a bit more of a realistic twist when the wrist rotates, okay? Okay, and you'll see that as I'm doing that, we're getting a more realistic twist of the muscle, okay? The way it should kind of be, all right? And then, although something happened with the, we're going to go back a bit because something happened with the finger and I rotated that. I must have caught part of the finger in the, weird. ZBrush is just being a bit silly. There we go. Okay, let's try this again, folks. Wait a minute. What is it? Oh, I know. I need to go further back. That's what it is. There we go. And in fact, actually, I think I might want to rotate it from here anyway. So that's actually been a happy accident. And we all know how much we like happy accidents. We'll rotate that in to his knee. So he's resting it on his, that's what we want. And again, we're going to take a mask further up the arm. We're going to mask that out. Sorry, invert it, my apologies. Create our transpose line. And we're going to rotate it by grabbing the middle one around the middle. Sorry, the middle handle and rotating it right to left. So that's going to allow us to rotate the forearm down the middle of the bone, if you will. Okay. Then we'll go in here and grab the wrist. I'm going to rotate this down. The fingers are a bit of a mess, but just want to get this in the right place. Okay, now I want to show you another quick trick with the transpose line. So you can use something called transpose masking. Again, if you've got decent topology, you can hold down Control, click and drag on a surface, and the transpose line will mask out the area. So you get a nice clean mask point. Okay, move that out of the way. There we go. But ZBrush is, ZBrush is just having a whale of a time to itself today. Okay, we'll now do the other arm. So this one, we're going to rotate forward a little bit, and we're going to bring it in, do a bit of movement here, but actually before we do that, we'll soften the mask and just move this in. Rotate it in. And we're going to do a bit of a stage by stage rotate here. So we're going to rotate a little bit up here, like so. Not too much. I can clean that up, that's not a problem. And then we will do a rotate on the forearm. Again, taking that quite far up, really softening it, and then drawing in a new transpose line, like so, and doing that. So now, and then what I'll do is I will mask out a little bit further down, and I'll just repeat that just to get a little bit more of a twist in the wrist. There we go. Then it's cleanup time. So I'm going to take the smooth brush and just smooth out some of these areas of anatomy. And that's just to do the kind of initial cleanup. Then you would go in and start re-sculpting the forms. So add a bit more compression there in the deltoid onto the chest. We've got a bit of a stretch here, so what we'll do is we'll move this back so that it's interesting. Why is that being, there we go. So we'll reshape the deltoid here, bring it in a bit closer, pull the lat down, and then do a bit of a relax. So we get something that looks like this. I mean, this is not perfect by any means, folks, but I really hope that this demonstration has shown you how we can go from an A pose with our creatures that are detailed, that we've detailed up, and we can get a pretty decent pose fairly quickly. I mean, it's only taken us, okay, we're about just over an hour and 15 on the posing side of this, which isn't too bad. What I think I want to do as well is I'm just going to add a bit more to this. Again, I'm going to use the gizmo for this, holding Alt and clicking on the bottom of the foot. We'll just do a tiny move. Maybe a bit more. Actually, you know what? Let's do a little bit. Let's kind of repeat that. Let's do something like this. No, I like that. I like that. Right, okay. Poke his wee tail in. All right. And if I'm being honest, folks, this is where I start to get really kind of excited with a model. Once we've got the character in a pose, once it's asymmetrical, now we can really start playing with the anatomy. Now we can, now you can have a lot of fun and you can sculpt in lots of variation. You can grab some reference, add in some interesting wrinkles, add extra volume where all the compression is, either against the skin or just even the compression of the muscle. One of the things that's really hard to do and can really, and will, let's say can, it says it will really sell your sculpts, is skin pushing against skin, which is what the inflate brush is good for. So you can use the inflate brush to bring it together, and then as you step up, you can use a similar effect that we did on the eyelids, and you can actually start doing something like this, where you create a little bit of a compression bump as the skin gets pushed together. Okay. Like I said, these little guys they've got, their skin almost looks paper thin. I was lucky enough to find a picture of a hairless baby macaque. And macaques are, obviously, there's lots of different types. Some of them have long tails, some of them don't. The snow monkeys don't have long tails. They're what are known as stump-tailed macaques. And they're part of that kind of family of them. So that in itself is kind of cool. You get all these different types. Now, our character has eyes, so we're going to now have to save it, and we're going to go back into the transpose master mode so that we can position his head. So there's all these little things that I want to fix now on his elbows and things. So we'll get to them. We'll eventually get to them. This might be one of the few images I actually just work on my own. I've really enjoyed doing this one, putting them together. Oh, we've lost pressure sensitivity. Let's bring that back. There we go. It'd be a good. This would be a good demo for things. That needs a bit of work in there. Okay, let's get the head done. Oh, wait a minute. What's going on in there? There we go. Okay, let's work on this head. So we'll go into T-pose mesh. And I mean, we've got a pretty decent position, but the head's just looking too straight down for me. So I'm going to take my mask lasso tool, be a bit more careful about the mask, and just make sure that I've got all the areas I want. We'll soften it off, and we're going to position the gizmo. I would say that the head's one of those areas that it really does matter. I'm going to position it roughly behind the ear, just at the around about the occipital region, and now I can just test that quite quickly. It seems to be okay. The water's actually getting in the way here, but just a tiny little movement with the head. And then we'll do the same with the eyes, except what we'll do is we'll do the eyes once we're out and back in. So let's go to T-pose sub T, get a little change with the head there. We can hide the, it's fine. Grab the eyeballs. Let's just make sure we've got dynamic symmetry on. That might work. No, it's not going to. Oh no, that's okay. Right. So, last little thing that we want to do here is, I say last little thing, I don't want to rush them, but I'm going to show you just roughly on the little toe of the character. I'm going to take up to about there, the first knuckle, if you will, invert it, and I'm going to use my transpose line. And generally when I'm doing toes and things, I don't really soften off the mask too much. I like to keep the mask quite harsh and then fix any kind of weird intersections in sculpting. I find it allows me to keep the volume of the finger, or the digit, if you will, much, much easier. That's too far back, so we'll move that forward. And this is the thing that can be the hardest part in posing in ZBrush, is just getting the camera into a position that works for you. Again, rotated it, and then I've had to move it as well to get the look that I need. Soften that one a little bit. There we go. Then do the same, just mask off the bit I don't need, redraw my transpose line, and switch to rotate, tweak the pivot as needed. There we go. Okay. Now obviously that's not perfect because we're going to have to, maybe adjust the sizes of the toes and things, but just to really show you how you go about posing those. You can see the difference it makes. You can just see all the little differences of a pose. They really do help. Okay. It helps bring your characters to life. It's why when you're doing your portfolios, if you can, don't put your character in a pose. Get them in a pose of some kind. There's loads of tools out there that are going to let you do that with your characters. Things like idle animations and stuff are really good to show your character, give it a bit of life, but wherever possible, add a bit of pose your characters. And the thing is, I mean, I'm guilty of it as well, folks. I am guilty of it as well. I sometimes just throw in an A pose on for my stuff, but there we go. Right, let's grab this, move it down a bit. Oh, we need to move this forward a bit, actually. There we go. And then we're going to take the water and move the water down. So there we go. So I'm going to hide that. And I'm going to take this here and I'm going to do a little bit of an adjustment to it. I'm going to take my knife curve. I'm going to cut it like so. Try that again. Let's do it with dynamic perspective off, so we get a nice clean section from it. And that is going to be our little diorama. Okay, folks. So I'm going to save that there. And while we never actually followed the plan I originally had in my head for our little Japanese macaque, I think what we've ended up doing is far more useful to new users of ZBrush, or even existing ones who haven't really used the transpose system before. And it can work. Okay, it can work really well. Obviously, I've shown that it can go really wrong at the same time, as we looked at the last time we were working on this project. But for the in the most part, it works pretty well, as long as you follow a few rules with it. So let's see where we started with this guy. I'm going to grab him, and then I'm going to. What should I do here? You know what? No, we're not going to look at where we came from. We've done that plenty of times. But all right, folks. Well, I think we are going to finish up there. We've taken an extra half an hour to kind of finish this guy to a fairly decent level. I'm going to continue with him, maybe use him as an example for sculpting fur at another point, and just kind of maybe use him as a good demo for posing and such of that. So it just leaves me to say thank you all very much for coming along and hanging out with me this afternoon on my return stream after my little break. It's been fantastic to kind of take you all through this. As always, please make sure to check out all the socials below for Firestorm Studios, and be sure to join us on the Discord. I'll be back next week for the letter K, where we're going to be sculpting a Kelpie, which is a creature of Scottish folklore designed by our very own Peter. So with that in mind, folks, oh, actually, I just remembered, it's in my head. We also have our live reviews. Heather and myself will be reviewing portfolios on Thursday at 1 p.m. UTC. So please make sure to check in then. And before that, you'll be able to catch our other streamers. We have Heather is going to be streaming tomorrow, as is Carmen. And we also have Peter streaming on Wednesday. So check out the schedule. And until then, folks, look after yourself, take care of one another, and I hope something really nice happens to you today. All right, folks.